Namaskar, good afternoon, bonsoir. Greetings from the Embassy of India in Bamako to all the viewers in Mali, Mauritania, and other places who are joining us online for this Gandhi Katha, the story of Mahatma Gandhi, on the occasion of 150 years of the birth of Gandhiji. Friends, even during the lifetime of Mahatma Gandhi, the world was well aware of his unique qualities and personality. Mahatma Gandhi stood out as a leader who always led by example. He demonstrated time and again that the problems and challenges of his times could be successfully addressed through the help of timeless values such as Satya, truthfulness, ahimsa, non-violence, and sarvodaya, the development of everyone in the society. Gandhiji's steadfast commitment to the peaceful means comes to the fore throughout his life journey. He repeatedly refused to accept the desired result if it was not achieved through the rightful and peaceful means. Gandhiji was not only a great political leader, he was also a social reformer, a profound thinker, philosopher, and a spiritual guide who touched and inspired the lives of people in India and across the world in many different ways. The solutions that he suggested almost a century ago are remarkably relevant to our times. It was in recognition of the universal principle of non-violence which Gandhiji practiced that the United Nations declared 2nd October, the birthday of Gandhiji, as the International Day of Non-Violence. The world is becoming increasingly aware that Gandhiji's teachings related to women, children, poor and marginalized people, economy, environment, etc., incorporated the principles on which the Sustainable Development Goals are based. The concepts of inclusive development and leaving no one behind are strongly reflected in Gandhiji's principles of Sarvodaya, development of one and all, and Antyodaya, development of the weakest in the society. I now have the pleasure of inviting Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna, an internationally acclaimed Gandhian scholar, to speak about the life of Mahatma Gandhi and the continued relevance of his teachings in our times. I would like to add that Dr. Radhakrishna grew up in Mahatma Gandhi's ashram in Sevagram in Wardha. She is on a mission to reintroduce Mahatma Gandhi to the people in India and across the world. I thank you, Dr. Radhakrishna, for joining us today. We are eagerly looking forward to your Gandhi Katha. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Ambassador Shri Anjani Kumarji, for your kind message. Namaskar and welcome to the Gandhi Katha, the story of Mahatma Gandhi, narrated by me during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, which incidentally is also the 150th birth anniversary of Kasturba Gandhi, his wife. I express my deep gratitude to the Embassy of India in Bamako, Mali, and for hosting the Gandhi Katha amidst these challenging times to learn from Gandhiji's philosophy of truth, Satya, non-violence, ahimsa, and purity of means, sadhana shuddhi, his spirituality, his environmental credo, his revolutionary ideas, his practices of health and wellness of body, mind, and spirit for coping up and staying safe physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually during and after the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected the entire humanity. On 2nd October, the world celebrates the UN International Day of Nonviolence. And in India, we celebrate the birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi as Gandhi Jayanti. The entire world is remembering Gandhiji the apostle of peace and nonviolence. We have an opportunity to remind the humanity of the efficacy of the messages of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation. I pay my respects to the leading lights of Mali and Mauritania and convey my warm welcome to the people and the Indian community who have joined me online today. Gandhi Katha is based on the ancient Indian oral tradition of Katha or storytelling with hymns and narration. I have given talks on Gandhi Katha in 94 countries during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Gandhiji in the past 2 years. In all the countries, people have great reverence and respect for Mahatma Gandhi. Many have been inspired by him to take up the cudgels against injustice through nonviolence. Others have followed his environmental credo, and still others have been deeply touched by his simple spiritual life. The humanism of the world's thought leaders are so deeply reflected in Mahatma Gandhi's teachings. The new generation is eager to understand more about the greatest man of the last century who made such a huge impact on humanity and inspired many leaders. Madiba Nelson Mandela, who was often dubbed as the Gandhi of South Africa, had strong Indian connections and striking similarities with India's father of the nation. The anti apartheid icon Madiba had said, and I quote, "The Mahatma is an integral part of our history because it is here that he first experimented with truth, here that he demonstrated his characteristic firmness in pursuit of justice, here that he developed satyagraha as a philosophy and a method of struggle." Gandhiji used to begin and end his day with prayers. These were prayers from all the religions of the world, Sarva Dharma Prarthana. Gandhiji's internal core comprised of the essence of all the religions, one that he had acquired from long study and reflection, the devotional poetry of the saint poets that he had heard, sung, and absorbed since childhood made up a significant part of this life of his soul. He said that ultimately all the religions point to the same truth of compassion, love, forgiveness, and tolerance, and that everyone must study the essence of all the religions in an attitude of perfect reverence and must have friendship and respect for the practitioners of different religions and diverse cultures. All of Gandhiji's friends were from different religions and cultural backgrounds from around the world, and he actively encouraged friendship across religions. And this was his way of propounding communal unity. Even after 7 decades of Gandhiji's passing on, in every part of the world, his relevance is felt as strongly as ever before, and his visions and actions are of an enduring significance for all times and places. His approach to life was holistic and cannot be divided into watertight compartments of social, religious, political, personal, or public life. Gandhiji stands out as the champion not only of political democracy but also of economic and spiritual democracy in today's world. Gandhiji believed that moral degeneration is the root cause of all evils, including conflicts. This explains his lifelong crusade of attainment of moral values such as truthfulness, nonviolence, purity of means, love, self control, sacrifice, forgiveness, friendliness, compassion, mercy, and so on. For Gandhiji, the principle of satyagraha or nonviolent resistance and civil disobedience was by non cooperation with evil through the moral values of love force, truth force, soul force, self sacrifice, and suffering. For him, the consideration for the sufferings of fellow human beings was of paramount importance. His beliefs and actions that social change for establishing justice and dignity of humans is both less harmful and more sustainable when achieved by non-violent means. His legacy of satyagraha is widely recognized and practiced the world over and is seen in many moments for civil rights even till today. Mahatma Gandhi's environmental practices were based on conservation of natural resources, which were often misused and overused for the sake of development. Gandhiji had warned about the unsustainability on the global scale a century ago. Equality for women within the society was a principle Gandhiji passionately believed in. His vision of Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, becomes very relevant in the crisis of internally displaced people and migrants. And it may well have been keeping in mind that very basic unit of human organization, a village or a county. His vision of Gram Swaraj, which is self-reliant, independent, self-governed village, is built on the premises of sustainable growth, which is the need of the hour. According to my understanding, Mahatma Gandhi's life was an epic of faith and endeavor. His faith was in truth, the ultimate reality of truth, and he endeavored to attain it through non-violence throughout his life till the very last breath. Gandhiji's adherence to truth, non-violence, and purity of means has inspired me to give Gandhi Katha so that people can put their hearts into understanding Gandhiji, get inspired to learn from his extraordinary ethical and moral leadership, his simple spiritual life, revolutionary thoughts, reforms, actions, his lifelong service to humanity against all forms of injustice, and how he continues to inspire people in all the parts of the globe at all times and in all ages. Perhaps the greatest source of strength for Mahatma Gandhi was in his faith in God. Truth was the deepest and the most complete form of God. The faith gave him the constant awareness that he was to be nothing but an instrument in his hands. He was to go wherever he was led. For him, the guidance of God constituted two things. One, he had to walk on the path enlightened by truth that was available to him in whatever measures and form. It was that path on which the great teachers of the world had already walked. And two, he had to constantly gaze inwards and find inspiration through self introspection, self examination, and self purification. And this he did by repeated questioning. And that question was Ko Aham, who am I? What am I? And what is the real purpose of my life? This question has been asked in our ancient Indian civilization since the past 5,000 years. The answer came to Gandhiji that the real purpose of life was to serve others. The deeper the faith, the greater was the endeavor for Mahatma Gandhi. He said, truth is God. Satya hi Parmeshwar hai. Faith in truth led Mahatma Gandhi to two other realizations. If God is omnipresent, then truth is omnipresent too. If each human being were an aspect of God, then each person is capable of truth, of being good and doing good to others. The second realization was that in spite of all the upheavals in the history of humankind, humanity will only progress in an auspicious direction because truth, that is God, is only interested in the welfare of its creation. His endeavor throughout his life was devoted to the search of that element of truth, to awaken it and to nurture it. This is why he could feel oneness with everyone. For most of us, this realization does not set in easily. Because of this understanding of oneness, Gandhiji had no enemies. He did not want to settle scores with anyone, and he did not want to take any revenge. He merely wanted to extend his love, compassion, service, and respect to everyone, and that was his trait. He respected individuals as individuals, and that was one more of traits that we see in Gandhiji. Romeo Rolla, the famous French writer and pacifist who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, wrote Gandhiji's biography in 1924, and the world came to know about him. And when during the after the second roundtable conference in London, Gandhiji was returning to India. On his way back, he stopped in Switzerland and spent 5 days in Villeneuve interacting with Romarola. And Romarola wrote, and I quote, "This little man is so fragile in appearance, is tireless, and fatigue is a word that does not exist in his vocabulary. He could calmly answer for hours without a muscle of his face twitching. His mind proceeds through successive experiments into action, and he follows a straight line, but he never stops." I will play the Gandhi Katha Dhun or hymn in Hindi that elaborates on Gandhiji's definition of truth as having harmony between thought, word, and deed.
मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर गान।
Mahatma Gandhi is the greatest apostle of peace the world has seen in the recent past. His notion of peace is focused on tolerance, forgiveness, love, respect, compassion, oneness, truth force, love force, soul force through self suffering and sacrifice. Albert Einstein, the greatest scientist of the first half of the 20th century, had called Mahatma Gandhi as the supreme practical leader for change and listening to his own voice.
I believe that Gandhi's views were the most enlightened of all the political men in our time. We should strive to do things in his spirit, not to use violence in fighting for our cause, but by non-participation in anything you believe is evil.
Gandhiji was the conscience keeper of humanity. That his ideas will be an inspiration to us both as individuals and as a society is beyond any doubt. He was an epoch maker, one who could sow the seeds for the next generation from the fruits of the previous one. Mahatma Gandhi is the most powerful visionary and a practical idealist from the first half of the last century, whose life is a role model for us all. But the effort has to begin from a point where you are standing. That is what made all Mahatma Gandhi's idealist actions practical, and he can be truly called a man of action. But it does not only mean he was very busy, that he was. What we mean is the action of putting ideas or beliefs into practice more than anything else was the driving force in his life. The answer for Mahatma Gandhi was always found in action. He had said, "An ounce of practice is worth more than tons of preaching." But if you want to understand Gandhiji, you will have to understand him not only with the intellect, but also from the emotional part of you and from acts from his life. Usually, people see him in different perspectives. Some people think of Gandhiji mostly as a politician. At the same time, some would think of him as a saint, and there are others who think of Gandhiji as a nation builder. He may be all of this, but I think when we consider Gandhiji, we have to try to find out what is the common stream in all these different aspects of life that you see in his personality. One was the commitment to value, and the second one was efficiency in the kind of work that you do. This is part of his comprehensiveness, and there was a unique mixture of, for example, enthusiasm on one hand and patience on the other. Mahatma Gandhi has made significant and seminal contributions that span across such disciplines such as economics, environment, social reforms, spirituality, conflict resolution, international peace, civil rights, education, politics, society, and so on. And at that time, the most harmful and destructive impact on the world was that of imperialism, violence, war, materialism, and the greed for controlling the world. Mahatma Gandhi advised to shun these seven social sins in his speech on October 22nd, 1925. Politics without principle, wealth without work, commerce without ethics, knowledge without character, pleasure without conscience, science without morality, worship without sacrifice. In my opinion, Mahatma Gandhi's life left the most powerful and strong imprint on the humanity of the world. He had said, "My life is my message." John Haynes Holmes was a pacifist, an anti war activist, and founder of the American Civil Liberties Union. He had met Gandhiji in London in 1931 and later on came to Delhi in 1947 and met him again. He found Gandhiji's presence, those bright eyes shining through his spectacles, his voice so clear and yet so gentle, his whole presence so simple and yet so strong. He had said, and I quote, "I believe that he is unquestionably the greatest man living in the world today. When I think of Gandhi, I think of Jesus Christ." I will play the Gandhi Katha Dhun in Hindi about Gandhiji's philosophy of truth, non-violence, purity of means that combine together in the form of
लागी रे लगन लागी रे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन लागी रे लगन लागी रे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सत्य अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन लागी लगन लागी लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन
Time magazine had listed out three most important protests over 190 years. The first one was the Boston Tea Party. The second one was the Dandi March or Salt Satyagraha. And the third one was the March of Washington. We can see a common thread. The first and second were against the same company, the East India Company. There is a common thread of nonviolence in all three. In 1930, with a pinch of salt, Mahatma Gandhi shook the world. He started out on 12th March from his Sabarmati ashram in Ahmedabad in Gujarat for Dandi seashore with 79 fellow marchers, walked for 24 days, walking 10 miles a day, stopped at 48 villages, gave speeches morning and evening to mobilize people to participate in the nonviolent campaign. He covered 241 miles till he reached Dandi seashore on 5th April. On 6th April, early in the morning hours, when he bent down and picked up a fistful of muddy lump of earth with salt, 100,000 people joined him. And towards the Satyagraha as it progressed, 300,000 people broke the salt law all over India. 1,362 newspapers covered the news. There were lots of foreign correspondents covering the news. William Lawrence Shearer, the American journalist, was also present during the salt satyagraha, and his graphic reporting brought the incidents to the notice of the world, and the world woke up to the power of satyagraha. So Mahatma Gandhi remains the most powerful global brand ambassador of nonviolence, a youth icon who fought relentlessly against injustice, an apostle of peace and nonviolence, a man whose values can make the world a better place today. Gandhiji spent his formative 18 years in India. The, the seeds of spirituality were sown in India. He spent 3 years in London studying to become a barrister, and that is the time when he came across and read the thoughts of Western philosophers and thinkers, and his vision expanded. He not only became a barrister but also learned the lessons of citizenship. And then he spent 20 years in South Africa. And that's where he did his sadhana and developed the concept of satyagraha and opposed the injustice of racial discrimination through satyagraha. In 1904 in South Africa, after reading John Ruskin's book Unto This Last, Barrister Mohandas Gandhi transformed his life overnight and started leading a community life of self-control, voluntary poverty, bread labor, and Sarvodaya, welfare of all. He established 4 ashrams in his lifetime, 2 in South Africa called Phoenix Settlement in 1904 and Tolstoy Farm in 1910, and 2 ashrams in India, the Sabarmati Ashram in Ahmedabad in Gujarat in 1917 and the Sevagram Ashram in Wardha in Maharashtra in 1936. And this is where Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi, along with the ashram community, lived in poverty like the common villagers of India. Ashrams were his ideals of a non-violent, face-to-face society for Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, and carrying out constructive programs, which is his second gift to humanity. The first one being Satyagraha. Gandhiji's ashrams had a mingling of political and spiritual aims. It was a practical laboratory for transforming ordinary men and women into extraordinary seekers and satyagrahis for offering the highest sacrifice in the freedom struggle on one hand, and to get involved in constructive programs to serve the poorest of the poor by establishing their self respect and dignity. His ashrams were his ideals of a non-violent face-to-face society for Sarvodaya, as I have said, for Swavalamban, self-reliance, for Swachhata, cleanliness, and Seva, service to humanity, for realizing his vision of village republic or Gram Swaraj. I'm happy to inform you that I was born in his last ashram in Sevagram. My father was inspired by Gandhiji since his childhood and joined the non-violent freedom struggle in India and lived in the Sevagram ashram. Even after Gandhiji passed on in 1948, for more than 5 decades, my parents and all of us have continued to walk on the path that Gandhiji has shown to humanity. So, what I am telling you today is based on what my parents have told me and my experience and understanding of Gandhiji. The life and thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi are intertwined and inseparable. His politics was imbued with his spiritual experiments, and his spirituality was tempered by his vision of a non-violent society. And his constructive programs was integral to his politics. The unique practices of Mahatma Gandhi, his control of palate, his fasts, his spinning, his silence, and his prayers gave him the internal strength and were as much a part of his politics as of his spiritual life. And these practices and experiments were sustained and nurtured by the inmates of the ashrams that he had founded, the ashram community, through their own practices, affirmed, modified, and validated Mahatma Gandhi's ideals and practices, and continues to do so even till today. This shows the relevance of his practices. In the ashram prayers morning and evening, the first verse from the Ishopanishad, the shortest Upanishad from our traditional Indian civilization, used to be recited. And that said, Ishavasya sarvam yat kincha jagatyan jagat tena tyaktena bhunjita ma kridha kasya svidhanam. That everything in this universe belongs to God. Nothing really belongs to us. Enjoy the objects of the world in an attitude of perfect non attachment by taking as much as you need and leaving the rest for others in the society. Never ever crave the possession of others. Nothing really belongs to us. So I will play the Gandhi Katha Dhun, in which it will reiterate the same philosophy of renounce and rejoice.
नायः तेरा नायः मेरा नायः तेरा नायः मेरा ईश्वर का यह राज है ईश्वर का यह राज है ईश्वर का जन ईश्वर का फल ईश्वर का जन ईश्वर का फल ईश्वर का ही राज है ईश्वर का ही राज है नायः तेरा नायः मेरा नायः तेरा नायः मेरा ईश्वर का यह राज है ईश्वर का यह राज है ईश्वर का जन ईश्वर का फल ईश्वर का जन ईश्वर का फल ईश्वर का ही राज है ईश्वर का ही राज है
Gandhiji carried out his experiments in health and wellness through nature cure, diet control, hydrotherapy, sun bath, mud packs, and observing silence for one whole day in his ashrams. Our friend and the British Quaker, Sir Horace Alexander, spent quite a few days in both of his ashrams, and he noticed that during the day the bell used to ring 56 times in the ashram. He said, and I quote, Gandhiji had wonderful. I was to learn quickly that he was the slave of watch. He had more to do in every 24 hours than almost any other man. So he had learnt how to pack the most into every minute. Yet he never gave the impression beg your pardon, of being hurried and impatient. Gandhiji has given three gifts to humanity: The first one is Satyagraha. The second one is constructive programs. And the third one is Ekadasha Vrata, about which people do not know. Ekadasha Vrata, or the 11 observances, were a set of rules made by Gandhiji for the ashram community for spiritual progress and voluntary self-control. The principle behind the Ekadasha Vrata was to do unto others what you want others to do unto you. Ivan Illich, the Croatian Austrian philosopher, had come to Sevagram ashram in 1980 and he spent a week there. Every day he sat in Bapu Kuti, or Gandhiji's cottage, which was very, very simple structure made up of locally available material, where he was living in voluntary poverty just like the common villagers of India. And Ivan Illich said, and I quote, "This hut of Mahatma Gandhi demonstrates to the world how the dignity of the common man can be brought up. It is also a symbol of happiness, which we can derive from practicing the principles of simplicity, service, and truthfulness." Though Gandhiji's role and contribution to the political arena are well known, what is less known is his contributions towards health. Gandhiji was a firm believer in the principle that a healthy mind keeps the body healthy, and he stressed the importance of a healthy lifestyle and positive thinking. His interest in health, hygiene, nutrition, and diseases was as great as his interest in politics. He insisted that adopting preventive measures for diseases was better than treatment. He also said that it was important to focus on cleanliness, a controlled diet, and an exercise regimen, and that it was best to avoid overconsumption of medicines, especially those that were not required. He was a firm believer of nature cure and conducted experiments related to diet and fasting since his student days. He always believed that it was important to understand what caused diseases and then remove that very cause, rather than falling ill again and again and then attempting to treat it with excessive medication. Gandhiji was essentially a man of science. He approached problems in a scientific manner. Mahatma Gandhi's message to the world on the vital question of health and well being is very important. To him, the study of this question was part of the service to God and His creation, which was his mission. Knowing to care summed up his life. His message is very simple and easy to follow. It encouraged everyone to respect simplicity, voluntary self control, reduce the bonds, follow the tradition, the cultural practices, the values, follow the environmental credo, and treat oneself through nature cure for living in harmony with nature. Gandhiji was very interested in health and wellness and remained ever vigilant about his own health as well as of others. He said that our lifestyle should be such that it should not let any diseases come anywhere near us, and every person is responsible for looking after his or her body, mind, and spirit impeccably. He also advised that in order for keeping physically, mentally, and spiritually healthy, we should have perfect understanding of our bodies, which is made up of the five elements that are found in nature. And that is what has been told by our ancient seers and sages of India. And these five elements are air, water, fire, earth, and space. For the wellness of our bodies and the balance and harmony between all these five elements is necessary. For Gandhiji, the outside universe was but a reflection of the inside universe. He repeated time and again that the universe is compressed in the atom. There is not one law for the atom and another for the universe. It was based on his actual spiritual experience that gave him the conviction that the moral principles have no meaning unless they can be made to serve as the guide of conduct in the daily affairs of man. The Sanskrit proverb Yatha Pinde Tatha Brahmande says, "You are the universe within the universe. As with the self, so is the universe. What is going on within you is same as what is going on in the universe." Enveloping ourselves in the rhythms and forms of nature can be transformative and healing. Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition of India, recommends spending time in nature every day. Doing so allows us to experience the wonderment of this existence with all our senses. Nature allows us to shift our attention beyond the domain of our ego and to recognize that we are inextricably connected to the universe. From the mind body perspective, Gandhiji's standpoint was that health is an optimal integration of body, mind, spirit, soul, and environment. Environment is our extended body. There is a nice Vedic expression from the ancient traditions of India which says, "As is the atom, so is the universe. As is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. As is the universal body, so is the cosmic body. As is the universal mind, so is the cosmic mind." Yoga and meditation integrate all components of health, and Gandhiji was a strong believer in nature cure, Ayurveda, and practiced Ashtanga Yoga as well. His experiments with nature cure were always on himself. He also advised his friends and disciples to follow these remedies and treated and cured 30,000 patients through nature cure. Dr. Sherwood Eddy was a leading American Protestant missionary, a prolific writer, and an educator who visited Gandhiji in the Sabarmati ashram in Gujarat in 1929, and he wrote that Gandhiji's bodily presence is like that of Apostle Paul or Socrates. He impressed us as the most childlike, the most transparent, the most lovable of man. His whole character is centered in his unique passion in truth and reality. And that reality he understood even while he was a young man. And in South Africa, when he came face to face with social injustice, with racial discrimination, he understood that the systems of the racial discrimination, the roots were very deep, and he had to really cut it out through non-violence, through self-sacrifice and suffering. So he understood in the dhun that I am going to play for you, "Rog ko mita ke chalo, rogi ko bachaya hum." He wanted to root out the evil, but not the evildoer.
रोग को मिटा के चलो रोग को बचाए हम रोग को मिटा के चलो रोग को बचाए हम पाप की उखाड़ जड़ पाप को बचाए हम पाप की उखाड़ जड़ पाप को बचाए हम जुल्मों को खत्म कर जुल्म को बचाए हम जुल्मों को खत्म कर जुल्म को बचाए हम अज्ञान को शेष कर भोग को बचाए हम अज्ञान को शेष कर भोग को बचाए हम रोग को मिटा के चलो रोग को बचाए हम पाप की उखाड़ जड़ पाप को बचाए हम जुल्मों को खत्म कर जुल्म को बचाए हम अज्ञान को शेष कर भोग को बचाए हम
Gandhiji was the first environmentalist much before the world was preoccupied with the concerns of ecological crisis and environmental degradation. And with his stunning premonition and knowledge, he had declared that the earth has enough for man's needs, but not for man's greed. He had also said that greed will be the main reason for the environmental degradation and the ecological crisis. He had predicted almost a century ago when he said the earth, the air, the land, and the water are not an inheritance from our forefathers but on loan from our children. So we have to hand it over to them as it was handed over to us. Very few people know that as a couple, Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi contributed immensely 123 years ago to public health emergencies, treating patients and serving them as frontline workers in the service of humanity. During the Second Anglo-Boer War from 1899 to 1902, and in the Zulu uprising of 1906 in South Africa, Barrister Mohandas Gandhi established the Natal Indian Ambulance Corps with 300 free Indians and 800 Indian indentured labor and served as stretcher bearers, carrying the grievously injured up to 21 miles per day. In the bubonic plague outbreak in Johannesburg in 1904, he and his wife Kasturba Gandhi rushed to help the Indian indentured labor, quarantined the patients in an empty godown after thoroughly cleaning and sanitizing it, and treated some of them through nature cure. Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi returned to India in 1915. In 1918, there was a pandemic of Spanish influenza. Gandhiji opened up his Sabarmati ashram as a quarantine center and treated and served patients through nature cure, provided simple vegetarian diet to boost immunity, and maintained physical distancing. Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi took care of the families of the patients, looked after their physical, mental, and spiritual needs, gave them correct information, and the maintaining of physical distancing, etc., being positive through prayers, meditation, and chanting, and taking care of each other during the time of Spanish flu pandemic. Gandhiji said on 10th November 1918 that our ancestors could build such tough bodies in the past, but today we are reduced to a state of miserable weakness and are easily infected by noxious germs moving about in the air. There is one and only one really effective way by which we can save ourselves from them even in our present broken state of health. That way is the way of self restraint, sanyam, and of imposing a limit on our acts, wants, and desires. In 1906 in South Africa, Gandhiji wrote many articles titled Guide to Diet in his Indian Opinion newspaper, which became quite popular. So in August 1942, Gandhiji wrote the book Key to Health, in which he wrote that anyone who observes the rules of health mentioned in this book will find that he has got in it a real key to unlock the gates leading him to health. He will not need to knock at the doors of doctors or Vaidyas or the traditional health practitioners from day to day. And this book became the most popular of all his books. Today, the world is facing three kinds of crisis globally. First is the COVID 19 pandemic, which is causing immense physical stress, sickness, death, fear of death, existential crisis. The second is the serious and long drawn financial crisis, which is also causing physical and mental anguish. And the third is the ecological crisis, which is impacting everyone. We have to look for answers somewhere within ourselves by learning from the life of Gandhiji, which is so open, so transparent, so honest, and it is available for everyone. The lesson the pandemic is teaching us is simple. When one member of the family falls sick, the entire family is affected, and soon the community is affected, the nation is affected, and then other communities in other nations in the globalized world. The well being of one individual has an impact on people on the other side of the globe. This is true of every action of ours. What we eat, what we buy, what we think, and what we do has reverberations and repercussions on all life on earth. It is this anubandha, this interconnectedness that sustains all life on earth. We are all in this together as one human family. as brothers and sisters, wherever we may be living, whichever color, creed, or religion we may be following, and whether we choose it or not, we only have one home, this planet Earth, our Mother Earth. Our ancient sages and seers have always looked upon us as Vishwamanava, global citizen, and said that the world is one family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The current COVID 19 pandemic is a wake up call for every country, big or small, rich or poor, developed or developing. It has opened our eyes to the fragility of the existence of humans. We will have to learn to live with coronavirus COVID 19 now and in the future as well. Instead of reinventing a new lifestyle, we just have to get inspired from the life of Gandhiji to make the necessary changes in thoughts, actions, and conduct for coping up physically, mentally, and spiritually. And this is the future that the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic is pointing out to us if we observe carefully. Many lessons are very clear, and some are still unknown, surrounding us in uncertainty. This uncertainty is causing mental stress, anxiety, existential crisis, fear of extinction, and death and mass psychology of living in depression and grief is pointing out towards this fact in the current pandemic. We are collectively grieving for the loss of our known lifestyle. But if we still return to the normal standard of finding happiness by chasing after money, power, position, lifelong consumerism, and mass distractions, it will only increase our problems. When a crisis makes you feel stressed, meditation and prayer relieves the stress responses. Fear and anxiety are forms of stress that become exaggerated when events become uncertain, when you feel a loss of control over the situation, and when the stress keeps repeating itself without let up. The thinking mind reacts to all of these conditions. It always has, even in normal times, but a crisis brings stress into high relief, making it very capable of lowering the immune system of our bodies and causing inflammatory diseases. Decades ago, stress was classified as epidemic of modern life. The Gandhian way of life is the best guide to practicing the coping mechanism that induces relaxation, calmness, inner peace, absence of anxiety, and remaining calm and positive. Therefore, Mahatma Gandhi comes across as the greatest healer and the wellness guru who comes free of cost. Gandhian principles of freedom from fear and care for all is a perfect prescription for these times of crisis. His emphasis on a healthy lifestyle, empowerment for self-care, and care in the community would make perfect sense. I once again take this opportunity to thank the Indian Mission for hosting Gandhi Katha. My special thanks are to all of you who have joined me online today. I will end the Gandhi Katha with the peace benediction in Sanskrit for the universal welfare. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Let all be happy. Let all be healthy. Let all experience auspiciousness. Let no one be overwhelmed by grief. Om, peace, peace, peace. The reason why I do Gandhi Katha is for my own spiritual progress. And this is what I hope you have got some kind of inspiration, and this is how we will express it in Gandhiji's blessings to you who had said that peace is the only positive force which will lead us from darkness towards light. So this Gandhi Katha may have brought peace to you, and I will end with the Gandhi Katha धुन गांधी कथा को भाव से सुनकर.
कथा को भाव से सुनकर अंतर को टटोले हम सबसे पहले अपने मन के सारे मन को खोले हम गांधी कथा को भाव से
अंतर को टटोले हम, सबसे पहले अपने मन के सारे मैल धोले हम। सत्य दीप से नित्य निरंतर भीतर को उजियारे हम, सत्य दीप से नित्य निरंतर भीतर को उजियारे हम। दम्भ दर्प और राग द्वेष को प्रेम अग्नि से जारे हम, दम्भ दर्प और राग द्वेष को प्रेम अग्नि से जारे हम। रानी कथा को भाव से सुनकर अंतर को टटोले हम, सबसे पहले अपने मन के साथ